The church was silent except for the soft rustle of black fabric and whispered condolences. I stood alone by my father's casket, barely acknowledged by the family I used to know. Then Jason's voice sliced through the quiet like a blade. "She's just here for the money. Dad probably cut her off anyway." A few guests chuckled, their eyes turning toward me, cold and curious. I didn't move. I didn't speak. But inside, I was shaking, with anger, with grief, with something I couldn't yet name. That's when the lawyer walked in, holding a small USB drive in one hand and a folded set of papers in the other. He cleared his throat. "Your father left a video message." A screen flickered to life. My father's face appeared, calm and composed. "If you're watching this, I'm already gone and I have some things to say." I'm Allison Hayes, and what came next changed everything. I was 28 and living in Berlin, thousands of miles away from the house I grew up in. Most people assumed I'd moved for work, but the truth was more complicated. I was a financial consultant now, successful by most standards, working with tech startups and advising small firms on how to scale smart. But I hadn't just left home for a job. I left because I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. Our family business was a logistics company based in Illinois, handed down through generations, and obsessed with tradition. From the moment we were old enough to walk, my brother Jason and I were expected to take part. Summer jobs in the warehouse, school projects about supply chains, dinner conversations that always circled back to shipments and margins. Jason thrived in it. He loved the structure, the authority, the attention. I, on the other hand, was a different story. They used to say I was too sensitive, that I didn't have the cutthroat instinct, that I asked too many questions and read too much into people's words. My stepmother Lillian loved to remind me that emotions were a weakness in business. My father never said those things to my face, but he didn't exactly correct them either. As I got older, the pressure only got worse. By college, I was done trying to fit into their mold. I studied economics and international finance instead of business administration. When I graduated, I packed my bags and accepted the first job offer that came from Europe. It felt like a clean slate. I'd built a new life for myself overseas, new friends, new routines, a career I was proud of. I rarely spoke about my family. Most people in Berlin didn't even know I had a brother. But despite the silence, there was one connection I never severed completely. My father. He would email once every few months. Just small things at first. An article he thought I'd like, a photo from his latest fishing trip. Occasionally, he'd comment on world events, or share something about the business. But as the years passed, his emails grew more personal. "Just know, I love you," one said after a long silence. Another time, he wrote, "Things aren't always what they seem. I hope you remember that." I read those lines over and over. They felt like hidden messages, like he wanted to say more but couldn't. I never pressed. Maybe I should have. We never talked about Jason. We never talked about Lillian. I think we both knew those conversations would only dig up old wounds. Still, I appreciated those emails more than I ever let on. They reminded me that someone in that house still cared, even if he wasn't free to show it. Over time, I noticed a shift in his tone. He seemed more tired, more reflective. He once mentioned having regrets, though he didn't say what they were, and when he said he was updating his estate plans, I figured it was just routine. He was nearing retirement after all. I had no idea it would all come to this. I hadn't seen Jason or Lillian in almost 6 years before the funeral. When I walked into that church, it felt like stepping into enemy territory. Their glances were sharp, their greetings hollow. Jason didn't even try to hide his contempt. And yet, standing there, I couldn't shake the feeling that my father had left me something. The last time I saw my father alive was through a video call. It had been a while since we spoke face to face, and the moment his image appeared on my screen, I noticed something was different. He looked older, more tired, like the weight of something heavy had been pressing on him for too long. But his eyes still held warmth. He smiled, as if seeing me brought him a sense of peace. We didn't talk about much at first. He asked about my work, how Berlin was treating me, if I'd taken any time off recently. Then he shifted the conversation, his tone more serious. He said he was thinking about making some changes to the company. I assumed he meant retirement, or maybe restructuring the leadership team. He never gave specifics, just a vague comment about needing to do what was right, even if it upset some people. I didn't press. Part of me figured he was finally ready to let Jason take full control. Jason and Lillian had been managing the company's day-to-day operations for years. They'd pushed me out gradually, first by excluding me from board meetings, then by freezing access to internal documents, and eventually by pretending like I never had any role in the business at all. My name had once been listed as a junior consultant during my internship years ago. By the time I'd checked the company website recently, it was like I had never existed. At the funeral, that reality hit me hard. No one hugged me. No one even made eye contact unless it was to sneer or whisper. When Jason approached, it wasn't with grief or civility. His eyes swept over me like I was an intruder. "Didn't expect you'd bother showing up," he said flatly. I said nothing. He leaned in slightly. "You're not getting anything, just so you know." Then he turned on a smile for the people nearby and raised his voice. "She's just here for the money. Dad probably cut her off anyway." There was laughter. Not loud, but enough. And it cut deep. One of my aunts passed me on the way to her seat, pausing just long enough to whisper, "She's probably back for the inheritance." I felt my face burn. I stood alone, clutching the program, trying not to crumble. In that moment, I questioned everything. Had my father believed their lies? Had he truly seen me as weak or disloyal or unworthy? Maybe those emails were just pity. Maybe that video call was his way of saying goodbye without saying it. I didn't know what to believe. All I knew was that I was surrounded by people who wanted me gone, and I had no idea just how badly they'd underestimated me, or how wrong they were about my father's final wishes. The reading of the will was held in my father's private office, the walls lined with plaques and awards from a lifetime of building Hayes Logistics from the ground up. Jason sat at the head of the table like he already owned the place. Lillian sat beside him, her lips casually crossed, fingers tapping against the leather armrest. Lillian sat beside him, her lips pressed into a smug smile. Jason chatted easily with the company's corporate attorney, throwing out plans to expand operations into Texas and hinting at a future rebranding. It was clear he thought this meeting was just a formality. The lawyer cleared his throat, lifting a thick folder from his briefcase. "Before we begin," he said, holding up a small USB drive, "your father requested this be played in full. It's a video message." Jason's smile faltered slightly. I leaned forward, heart thudding. The lawyer plugged the USB into a laptop connected to a monitor on the wall. The screen blinked to life, and suddenly, there he was. My father. His face was drawn but steady, eyes direct. "If you're watching this," he began, "I've passed on, and before you hear anything else, I need to set the record straight." The room fell silent. My father continued, "To my daughter Allison, I want you to know how proud I am of you. You followed your own path, even when it meant leaving everything familiar behind. You've built a life with integrity, independence, and grace. I may not have said it often enough, but I admired your courage." A lump formed in my throat. Jason shifted uncomfortably. My father's tone hardened. "Now, to Jason. You've spent years convincing everyone that Allison was selfish, disloyal, and unworthy of her place in this family. But I've known for some time what you've been doing behind the scenes. You've used company accounts to fund personal vacations, lease luxury cars, and cover expenses for women you never intended to marry." Gasps rippled across the room. Lillian's mouth opened slightly, as if trying to form words. "You've manipulated board members, falsified reports, and misled investors. I trusted you with a legacy, and you used it for ego and excess." I sat, frozen, stunned that he'd said it. Out loud, on record, with no room for denial. Jason's jaw clenched. He muttered something under his breath, but the room wasn't listening to him anymore. "And now," my father said, "I'm making sure the company and this family are in the right hands." I felt my breath catch. The air seemed to thicken. I knew he was about to say something big, something irreversible. And yet, even then, I couldn't have predicted just how far my father had gone to make things right. What he said next would unravel everything Jason had spent years constructing. My father's voice continued, steady and sharp. Jason, you forged my signature last year on a transfer authorization. I've known since June. The room froze. The lawyer, without a word, clicked his mouse and brought up a series of documents on the screen. There were scanned PDFs of internal memos, side-by-side comparisons of real and forged signatures, followed by accounting logs detailing unauthorized wire transfers. At the bottom of each record, my father had left notes, notations, even an affidavit from a handwriting expert. It was meticulous. Jason's face turned pale. His eyes darted across the screen, then to the guests in the room. He opened his mouth, but my father's voice returned before he could speak. I didn't act immediately because I wanted to be absolutely certain. Once I confirmed what you'd done, I reported the embezzlement and revised my estate plan. You thought you were untouchable. You counted on me staying silent. But I won't let my legacy be destroyed. Jason jumped to his feet. This is insane. This whole thing is a setup, he shouted, pointing at me. She manipulated him. She probably convinced him to record this. The lawyer stood calmly. Mr. Hayes, he said, addressing Jason with practiced professionalism. Please, sit down. You'll have your chance to respond. Jason huffed, but dropped back into his chair, seething. Lillian said nothing, her arms folded tightly, face drained of color. Then came the final blow. My father's voice returned one last time. As of the date of this recording, I have amended my will and all corporate documentation. Effective immediately upon my death, controlling interest in Hayes Logistics transfers to my daughter, Allison Hayes. She is now majority shareholder, primary executor of my estate, and trustee of the family home, and all personal assets. I trust her, I believe in her, and I know she will do what's right. Gasps filled the room. Even the lawyer looked briefly shaken, though he quickly composed himself. Jason exploded. No, absolutely not. This is a lie. There's no way he would do that. His voice cracked. She abandoned the family. She doesn't even live here. The lawyer didn't respond to Jason's outburst. Instead, he walked toward me with a large envelope. He handed it to me gently. Inside, you'll find the transfer of ownership documents, access codes to all financial accounts, the deed to the family home, and power of attorney over the estate. I stared at the envelope, heart racing, hands trembling. Everything Jason had assumed was his had been rerouted, quietly, legally, and complete. Jason surged forward again, but 2 security staff from the law office stepped in without being asked. If you cause another disruption, Mr. Hayes, you'll be escorted out, one of them said calmly. Jason looked at me, his face twisted in fury. You think you've won? You don't know what you're doing. You're not built for this. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My father had spoken for me, and handed me everything Jason thought he could steal. Jason and Lillian stormed out of the will reading like a pair of disgraced politicians. He was still shouting about fraud, calling me a manipulator, accusing the lawyer of being in on some elaborate scheme. Lillian followed close behind, red-faced and silent, clutching her handbag like it held whatever power she had left. But it was already too late. The damage was done, recorded and undeniable, had shattered every illusion Jason tried to build around himself. There was no hiding anymore. I stayed behind, quiet but composed. Inside, I was shaking, not with fear, but with something sharper. It was anger, yes, but also resolve. I hadn't asked for this, but now that it was mine, I would handle it. I owed that much to my father, and to myself. Less than 48 hours later, I received my first call from the Hayes Logistics Board of Directors. One by one, each member acknowledged the video. Most of them had worked with my father for decades. They trusted him, respected him, and they knew he wouldn't make such a decision lightly. Some even apologized to me for believing Jason's version of events. One woman, a senior logistics director named Miriam, told me quietly, "Your father wanted you to be safe. That's why he waited. But he always intended for this company to end up in the right hands." Not everyone was thrilled. A few board members had been Jason's allies, but the will, the ownership documents, and the video were airtight. There was nothing they could do to stop the transition. I flew into Chicago the following week. Jason tried to block my entry into the corporate headquarters by sending out a mass email to security and building management, claiming I was a disgruntled ex-employee. What he didn't count on was that I arrived with my attorney and a court-ordered injunction, stamped and signed, guaranteeing my full access to the premises and the company's operations. When I walked into the building, flanked by legal counsel and a private security officer, something unexpected happened. People clapped. Not everyone, but enough. Some smiled, others nodded. A few whispered, "Finally." It became clear very quickly that Jason had not been as beloved as he believed. I passed by 2 receptionists who stood up to greet me. One said, "We've been waiting for this day for a long time." I didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, I froze all discretionary spending accounts and suspended Jason's executive privileges pending further review. Then I instructed the finance team to conduct a preliminary audit of the last 18 months. What they found in that short window mirrored everything in my father's video. The HR department, emboldened by my presence, came forward with a thick file. It contained complaints that had been suppressed or ignored during Jason's tenure. Allegations of harassment, misuse of authority, and intimidation. Several women described how their careers were stalled after refusing Jason's advances. Lower-level staff submitted written statements about being overworked, underpaid, and publicly humiliated by him during team meetings. I initiated a full forensic audit. I brought in an independent firm with no prior ties to the company. They combed through expense reports, vendor contracts, and executive bonuses. The findings were devastating. Jason had funneled company money into private accounts, charged lavish vacations as client development, and signed off on ghost employees who never existed. Meanwhile, Lillian had quietly resigned from her position as head of corporate culture, a title she gave herself after marrying my father. She had approved expense reimbursements for luxury spa packages and personal shopping trips, labeled as staff morale initiatives. The evidence didn't just validate the video, it expanded it. What started as a scandal turned into a full-scale reckoning. With legal support, I terminated Jason's employment for cause. The board voted unanimously to bar him from holding any future position within Hayes Logistics or any of its subsidiaries. As I signed the official termination paperwork, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like I had finally washed away years of gaslighting, exclusion, and betrayal. My revenge wasn't loud. It was methodical, precise, and permanent, and it was exactly what my father trusted me to do. 3 months after my father's funeral, Hayes Logistics looked nothing like the company Jason had once ruled with an iron fist. I had taken over as interim CEO, not just by name, but in every way that mattered. I wasn't a figurehead. I was there every day, reviewing financial reports, sitting in on department meetings, and rebuilding the trust Jason had burned to the ground. There was still tension in the air, but it was different now. It wasn't fear. It was hope. For the first time in years, employees felt like someone was listening. One of my first acts as CEO was reinstating the Employee Scholarship Fund. Jason had canceled it, claiming it was a waste of resources. I reactivated it immediately and doubled its budget. When I announced the change, a warehouse supervisor approached me privately and said, "My daughter cried when she got the email. She didn't think she'd ever get to finish college, thank you." I also launched a new mentorship program for junior staff, focusing on women and minorities in operations and logistics, groups that had been quietly pushed to the margins under Jason's leadership. I met with every department head personally, not to intimidate them, but to learn from them. Many confessed they'd been afraid to speak up before. Now they were contributing ideas, not just complaints. I refused all media requests. There were plenty. Reporters wanted the story, the scandal, the betrayal, the inheritance twist. But I wasn't interested in putting my family's dysfunction on public display. My focus was on rebuilding a legacy, not feeding headlines. The only public statement I made was a post on LinkedIn. It read, My father built Hayes Logistics with honesty and grit. I intend to lead it with the same values. Thank you to those who believed in me quietly. Now, it's time to deliver. The post went viral within our industry, not because it was flashy, but because it was real. People were tired of corporate arrogance. They wanted substance. I gave them that. Jason, of course, didn't go quietly. He attempted to sue me for wrongful termination, for defamation, even for emotional distress, but the legal team shut down each claim. The audit results were airtight. Every accusation in my father's video had been backed by evidence. Jason's forged signatures, misused funds, and HR violations made him toxic, even outside our company. He tried pitching himself to other firms, but his reputation had crumbled. Lillian vanished from the public scene entirely. After a brief investigation into her misuse of company funds, she cut a private deal to avoid prosecution. She quietly moved to another state and left the corporate world behind. No one missed her. As for me, I didn't take a bonus. I didn't change my title. I didn't move into my father's corner office. I kept his nameplate on the door and worked from the conference room instead. For now, it felt right. I wasn't here to erase his memory. I was here to honor it. In time, I hired a full-time CEO to lead the company day to day, someone with a deep respect for the values I wanted to preserve. I stayed on as chairwoman, guiding long-term strategy and protecting what we'd rebuilt. My father once told me, "True power isn't loud, it's steady." I finally understood what he meant. I hadn't just taken back what was mine. I'd made it better. Not through vengeance, but through vision. And I knew, wherever he was, he'd be proud of the woman I'd become. The family estate sat on the edge of a quiet lake, the trees still bare from winter, their branches casting soft shadows across the porch. I hadn't been back here in years, not since the tension with Lillian became unbearable. But now it was mine. My father had left it to me, not just as an asset, but as a symbol. A place to return to when I needed to remember who I was and where I came from. I walked through each room slowly, fingers brushing the wood banister, the old photo frames, the worn armrests of his favorite chair. On the kitchen counter was a sealed envelope. My name was written on it in his handwriting. No address, no instructions, just my name. I sat down at the table, took a deep breath, and opened it. The letter inside was short. "Allison, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. I know how cruel they've been. I know the things they said about you. I knew they'd come for you again like they always did. I hope this protects you longer than I ever could in life. I want you to know, I saw everything. I was just too slow to act. But I never stopped being proud of you, and I never stopped loving you." The tears came fast, unstoppable. I clutched the letter to my chest and sobbed into the stillness of the kitchen. It wasn't about the company. It wasn't about the inheritance or the control. It was about this moment. Knowing that he hadn't been blind, that he had been fooled by Jason's stories, that he had always believed in me, even when he didn't have the strength to show it. He hadn't left me a fortune. He'd left me freedom. A chance to step out from the shadows. A chance to be seen for who I truly was. When I returned to the office the following Monday, the air felt different. Lighter. Colleagues nodded as I walked past. Some smiled. Some offered quiet greetings. There was no tension, no suspicion, just respect. Not because of the last name I carried, or the title on my badge, but because they had seen what I stood for. As I stepped into the boardroom for a strategy session, one of the junior analysts opened the door for me and said, "Morning, Miss Hayes. Glad you're here." I smiled and thanked him. In that moment, I didn't feel like the girl who had been cut out, humiliated, and pushed away. I wasn't the black sheep, the exile, or the scapegoat. I was the woman my father knew I could become, the one who'd walked through fire without losing herself, the one who took back what was stolen and did something better with it. I wasn't just avenging a legacy. I was building one of my own, One that would never be defined by betrayal, but by truth, courage, and quiet strength. Betrayal cuts deep, especially when it comes from the people who share your blood. When it's your own brother smearing your name, your own stepmother whispering lies, and the people you once called family turning their backs on you. It carves out a pain that doesn't go away easily. For years, I questioned my worth. I wondered if I was too sensitive, too distant, too different. They made me feel like I didn't belong. But the truth has a way of rising, even when buried under years of deceit. Sometimes, the justice you thought died with your last goodbye comes roaring back from the grave. My father may have been quiet in life, but in death, he gave me the greatest gift of all: truth, clarity, and a clean slate. My name is Allison Hayes. I didn't come for revenge. I came for the truth. And now, I'm building something that no one can take from me. To anyone out there who's been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you, who's been silenced, ignored, or cast aside, know this: you are not alone. Your story matters. Your strength is still there, waiting to be reclaimed. Subscribe to Veiled Fury for more stories of justice, strength, and power reclaimed, because sometimes the most powerful redemption doesn't come from fighting back. It comes from rising above. And when you rise, make sure they never forget who they tried to bury. You're not done. You're just getting started.